a lot of women don't understand that a man's leadership and his like penetrative warrior aspect is not always going to be palatable to her. It's not always going to fit into the boxes and conditions of her preferences. And oftentimes it will be extremely uncomfortable. But if you refuse to receive him in that, if it doesn't fit into what's comfortable in your body, you are actually not receiving him fully as a man. And over time, a man is, I would say, ultimately less inclined to, feel a deep sense of safety in his primality with a woman like that. And so he will either withhold, or he'll become resentful, or he'll, just not bring all of himself into the space. And so there's an art form for women, like really learning how to receive this in their man, even when it's super uncomfortable. Like he said, even when it's cutting, even when it calls her shadow out really intensely, like to be able to receive a man. And that is almost crucial to a relationship being able to thrive in an integrated way, meaning not just all love and light and beauty and devotion and softness, but depth and passion and polarity and intimacy is really like, it necessitates a woman being able to receive this aspect of a man. And we kind of have a funny story about this while we're talking about this aspect. There was a moment between us where we were learning how to like navigate through a lot of different aspects in our dynamic. And I would say I was practicing receiving some of these edgier aspects of him that I wanted and that I was calling forward and invoking or evoking in the space because I could feel them under the surface. And the deeper aspects of me, my womb, my soul, were wanting those deeper aspects of him to come forward. But of course, that's not always going to be a comfortable thing for me as a woman when they actually come forward. And there was a moment where I would say I was in a like provoking kind of energy with him, trying to bring some of that out. And also in some of my own, shadow aspects of like trying to control or not feeling safe to fully surrender. I can do this on my own kind of thing. And there was a moment where we were in sort of a bit of a conflict within all of those pieces. And I kept insisting to him, I'm the man in this relationship. Like, you're not the man, I'm the man. And I got up to walk away, like in the middle of this, little, I don't know what to call it. Like, it's hard to even call it a conflict. It's just like a little tussle, so to speak. I talk about tussling a lot. And I get up to walk away from him, and finally his like deeper like anger comes out, his intensity, and he comes after me and he picks me up and he slams me against the wall with like my legs straddled around him and is in my face and is like, who's the man now? And immediately my whole energy just completely shifted. And I dropped right back into my body, my submission, my heart. And I just like so much desire and like respect, and totally shifted the vibe between us.
I would have called that a conflict.
Okay. So yeah.
And she stormed off. And then, but after I did that, you smiled instantaneously. She like couldn't help herself from smiling. I was like, oh, it worked.
Yeah. That, like, when you spoke to tussling earlier, like in a previous conversation, that was like exactly kind of what happened there. Is that like you turned the chaos of the feminine into like a playful, powerful.
Yeah, it's like transmuting the energy through his dominance ultimately.
Yeah, it's containment.
Yeah. Can you speak to the collar and what that represents in your guys' relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, so ultimately the collar is a symbol of my devotion and my submission to him. And it's like a symbol that we use to ultimately keep us in our rightful postures within the union, because as we started navigating different layers once we got married in terms of our dynamic, and like we talked about earlier in the interview, just challenges coming up, working through different layers of conflict, going through some really intense things together, we would find ourselves slipping out of our polarity just by nature of what we were navigating and some of the challenges that we're presenting, even though coming into this union, we were both very much on the same page about our values there and wanting to be in a polarized, more traditional dynamic, him being the leader, me submitting, surrendering to him, and that being the foundation of our relationship is like my devotion, his leadership. And we were slipping out of that on and off. It's not to say we wouldn't find our way back to it, but there were definitely some periods where we were like, wow, we are really far from where we want to be, where we know we can be, where we plan to be. And there was just a turning moment in all of that where we were kind of slowly working our way back into our rightful polarity and staying there a little more frequently, but we were still sliding out of it. And so we would have a lot of conversations about this where we would talk about the root of it and how, okay, when certain aspects of our union shift into a little more integration, well, then maybe that polarity will come back. And then finally just reached this point. We had a night together where it was a really cold night here, and we were talking about it and just had this deep revelation that came through where just this understanding that the conditions are never going to be perfect, and that's not actually what it's about. That like really activating and maintaining that form of traditional polarity and like rightful posturing between us is a literal day-to-day thing of consistency and work and effort and practice. And when I say effort, I don't mean that it's hard for us to be in that polarity, but when things are difficult, it's easier to slip out of it. It's easier to forget that this is my orientation in this union. This is what feels best for me. This is what feels best for him. When we're in this posturing, there's less conflict. There's so much more intimacy. We both feel better. Everything flows better. We can co-create more easily. And we knew that, but we weren't staying in that in the way we both wanted to. And on that particular night, we were speaking about this concept of the rightful posturing. Like, what is, like, assume the correct position. What is the correct position within a relationship? For me as a woman, that is being surrendered and submitted to his leadership, being devoted to him, even when he's not perfectly leading. And for him, it's holding that powerful pillar of masculine leadership, holding his frame, being the protector, the provider, the leader, no matter what. And in this kind of connection, conversation, and revelation we had, there something came back to me that I had purchased this collar last year very intentionally to have it be placed on me by my husband. And when I got the collar, I did a prayer ceremony with it where I offered it to God, and I basically prayed to God and said, other than belonging to you first and foremost, this collar is like to be a symbol of me belonging to my husband. And when you bring my husband to me, he will put this collar on me, and that will be a symbol of my devotion to him and to belonging to one man. And then I put the collar away, and it was like packed away because we moved into this place right around when we came together. I had just moved in. And so a lot of my stuff was still in boxes. It was just packed away with other little sacred things, and I hadn't really thought about it. And I mean, maybe it crossed my mind a couple times, but we were just in this whirlwind of integrating our marriages and traveling, and there was so much going on. But that night, as we were speaking about assume the right position, and I just kept feeling this knowing, this like burning knowing, we can't wait for the conditions to correct themselves to this ideal place for us to feel that we're operating from this polarity that we know is rightful, and it feels good, like it feels right. And then I remembered the collar that night. It came into my consciousness, and I said, okay, wait a minute. I think I have an idea. Like, I think I know what the missing link has been. And I went and I found it, and I brought it out, and I just kind of presented it to him, and asked him sort of like, are you ready for this? Like, are you ready for us to actually do this? Like we've been speaking about fully. And he put it on me. And I can say really, like, just from the deepest part of the clarity within me, that symbols matter. When there's intention behind it, symbols really matter. And it shifted everything between us that night. And that's not to say we all of a sudden don't have any issues or anything like that, but how we have been navigating everything has been hugely different from that moment. Our dynamic has been hugely different because I can't lose sight of my values internally when I have this symbol that is literally reminding me every moment of my rightful position in this union and my devotion to him and my surrender and my submission to his leadership. And in the moments that I forget, literally, it's like I can't go very far without seeing, feeling the representation of my vows to this man and to belong to him, which was my vow to like belong to him fully, body, mind, heart, spirit, soul, all of it. Like I gave that to him the days we got married. And this to me is a symbol of that. And I've tested it. Like I took it off one night, like let's just see what happens if we take it back off. Immediate shift, like very noticeable shift, at least for me. And I'll let Ryan speak to his experience, but for me, it keeps me in my rightful orientation to him. And it's really deepened our connection and our relationship profoundly through that, the lens of polarity and having a dynamic that is really rooted in that and prioritizing that, even when things are difficult, even when things aren't ideal, as opposed to letting the conditions create the polarity. We chose that night to let the polarity create the conditions.
Beautiful. Ryan, what has that experience been for you with the color?
What hit me when you were talking was the symbols matter. Like symbols matter. It's a reminder in the physical of your position. My position. I'm married to her. So if I'm like walking through a store and there's like a pretty girl, it's like, I'm married. You can show the symbol. It's very clear to your external environment. And it's a reminder to self. Similarly, I mean, it's a symbol, right? Of her rightful posturing. And it's not that we weren't embodying it, like we were touching the dynamic. But it was like touch and go. It wasn't consistent and anchored. It was more infrequent and sporadic. And I do agree. I don't think I had the same conceptual idea and like weight necessarily on the caller as she did, because she's the one that like got it and had intention behind it and put prayers into it. But it definitely shifted something. Absolutely. Like energetically, it shifted something. And yeah, like to be completely honest, there's a part of me that was like uncomfortable with it, just with my, yeah, again, coming from a more neutralized relational background. And I think just societally, socially, that's something that's going to be like super edgy for a lot of people. Like for me to say you're my property and like that is a symbol that you're my property is pretty edgy. Like people would be pretty triggered by that, I imagine, because it's edgy for me. But it's, again, it's like it's more about the energetics, and that just happens to be external representation of energetics. And energetically, I want to lead. Not only do I want to lead energetically, if I'm not leading, I don't feel good. I'm not in purpose. And it creates a whole host of problems within the dynamic. And lastly, I just want to go back to the environment and the like symbol and the creation of the energy. You cannot wait for an environment to change for you to then find your right posturing. As we've said, this is inside out game. So if you want your external environment to rearrange itself to how you desire it to look or for its rightful posturing, then you're going to have to embody what that looks like, feels like, moves like, speaks like, acts like, for as much as you possibly can in every moment. And then it like will naturally start rearranging externally. And yeah, that again, the caller just feels like an external reminder that allows us to go back into that space more consistently than if it's not there. It's like,
Yeah.
I could point at it, like I can like pull it, like be like, yeah, it's there. Remember, like who's the leader here? Do you want to lead? Like, I'm pretty sure you don't want to lead because you're wearing a collar.
It's true.
And the thing is like women that, it's good to bring these things up because a lot of women have this concept of these things, right? Like they're like, yes, it sounds so great to let a man lead. Oh, I don't have to do as much. I can relax more. Like I can just be more in my feminine. But then when they're actually invited into that, it's a totally different story. And I can speak to that from my personal experience. It's like you're always going to hit up against these deeper edges of what happens when you actually allow a man to lead. Like, but wait, I want you to lead, but not that way. I want you to lead my way. Okay, when you're leading my way, it feels good. But what happens when you actually let him lead? Not with these like conditions. And it's like then a woman actually has to face her own death process, her own identification with control, like her own, oh, but I prefer it this way. This is what feels best to me. And a lot of women say they want a man to lead, but they don't actually know what it feels like to fully allow that and surrender to that and what that actually requires. So it's a good reminder what Ryan's saying is like sometimes I even need reminders because I do want him to lead, but does that mean it's always easy?
Yeah. It's like those deaths of yourself over and over again. What was the symbolism for both of you around the hand fasting?
Yeah, I think again that more kind of came through her, but there was deep resonance in it for me. In that, yeah, I had watched Outlander, like we both watched Outlander, but more importantly than that, we both have Scottish, Celtic, Irish lineage and roots, and so it felt like one to go back to the land and beyond the physical land was really important again for anchoring in the energetics of these like elevated spiritual beings meeting and like putting it into the grid of the earth to solidify it and no back doors, like we're only going forward. And the hand fasting felt like just another opportunity to oath before God on incredibly potent land, and almost as an ode to our ancestors and our lineage of like we're not going to let that pass into history. Like we're going to keep that tradition alive and like share it with the world and how important it is. Because yeah, each ceremony was different, it like one was in Costa Rica and it was basically just crafted. Like it wasn't traditional by any sense of the means. Eisen and Shanti married us on a cliffside on a beach, the same cliff that they got married a week after meeting. And they were the officiants. Like they guided us through that ceremony. And it was actually ended up being a water ceremony where we had 2 glasses of water and we spoke our vows into a glass of water. And then we poured both glasses into one and we drank from it. So we like drank my vows. I drank her vows. We drank our vows essentially. Meanwhile, it started raining. And in the background, in the environment, lightning was striking the ocean, which is the macro, like physical manifestation of the masculine and feminine forces in nature. It's like you have the lightning penetrative force hitting the water, the feminine waters. And so yeah, the hand fasting had its own like different energy and different integration and different challenges and different beauty. And it added another layer of solidity, I think, that again, it's like burn the ships, like we're doing it. And not only that, but we're connecting and honoring to our lineages, essentially almost like drawing on it in a way of like be with us on our journey.
Yeah.
Like aid us.
Yeah, I would say that like the Scotland ceremony was really where there was an implementation of legacy more than anything, because Costa Rica was beautiful, but us both having Scottish, Irish, and Celtic ancestry, we both have this deep desire and longing and like value around continuing the bloodline we both come from and the traditions that are incorporated within those bloodlines and that ancestry. And so it felt like a nod to legacy, the legacy that we're building together, to do it intentionally, to go to lands that hold very specific templates, to our bloodline and to where we come from, and also just where I have a deep resonance on a soul level. I teach a lot of Celtic based teachings, Grail oriented teachings in my work, and I have for many years. And so I always knew I would wind up with a man who shared similar bloodlines, and then I did. And so I had already been planning to go to Scotland. And then when I met Ryan, it was just perfect timing. And I told him I wanted to go. And he said, well, I'm pretty sure we're supposed to go together. And then we did. And just made it a very intentional spiritual pilgrimage to anchor the next layer deeper of our union.
It's beautiful. I love the hand fasting tradition of it. Yeah, it just feels like lifetimes and just very ancient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to the offering that you have coming up?
Yeah, sure. I'll start, and then if you want to add anything.
Sure, absolutely.
So we have known for a while that part of our purpose together is to co-create and to bring the fruits of our union template to the world, because we both share, very strong belief that some of the facets of the new world that is going to be created in terms of like creating heaven on earth is going to come through the pillars of very powerful couples coming together into union, and that holding pillar in communities that will eventually obviously contribute to strong, thriving families, networks, and again, just like communal systems and structures and things that are going to be born as we move into this new age. We feel that really powerful sacred unions will be at the center of that. And ultimately for us, we just kind of wanted to wait until it became clear the direction we were being guided of like how we're serving together. And the first thing that became really obvious to us is really allowing the unique aspects of our union template to be of service to those who know they share a similar template. Because I have a lot of women who come to me who speak to me about the union they know they're destined for and what it feels like. And, again, like very similar qualities to what I knew within myself. And a lot of times what they share in common is there's a part of them that is thinking like, am I crazy? Is this even real? Does this exist? Am I having too high of expectations of what's possible in union? And ultimately, like through our experience, I feel that we have a lot to offer others around not just believing in, trusting in, having faith in this kind of union, but preparing for it properly and then navigating it with grace once they come into this form of union, because it's not easy. It's very, very much worth everything that goes into it, but it is a walk of faith. It requires conviction. It requires like a almost otherworldly form of courage to surrender to God that deeply through the journey of union. And we strongly believe that more and more couples will be coming into this form of union. And so we want to serve and support that by sort of allowing our story of like, we went first, now this is kind of our it's our time to like support others in that as well, and to offer that externally to others as a part of our co-creative energies, being birthed into the world and our legacy. So we're going to be holding a masterclass. It'll be pretty long, probably be 2.5 hours or so on Valentine's Day this year, called Oath. And right now we have just been sort of building out how we want it to flow, what it's going to be like, what we're going to offer and teach within it. And I'll let Ryan speak a little bit to it as well. But yeah, it's called Oath, the Sacrament of Union. And we're encoding it through, the words and the terminology and the phrase so that people can really feel the sanctity of this kind of union and can come into our field from this understanding that this is possible for anyone that knows that they're templated for it and is willing to do the work internally to receive that. It is available for so many more humans than believe that it's accessible to them. And we're just sort of trusting that the right people that know that they're built for that they want that and are committed to that will find their way to us. And then we can, not only share our story, but really share a lot of actionable tools, frequency, like embodiment, entrainment, like what does it take both preparing for this? What does it take coming into it? How do you navigate it once you're in it? What are some tools for, again, like navigating spiritual warfare, alchemizing and transmuting conflict, tussling, transmuting that into intimacy and passion and so many other things. And I'll let Ryan add whatever he feels called about it.
Yeah, I think to get to the point of when we came together, we always knew that we were going to co-create together and that this template was something that needed to be shared. It was actually a responsibility. There wasn't a choice necessarily in the matter. When you come into something like this and you're giving it up to God and you're asking God, show me the way, and God shows you the way, and God says, here you go. And then from there you go, okay, wow, I'm going to have to embody this to the best of my ability in every now moment, and then share it and blast it out into the frequency of the earth so that other people can hear the message, resonate with the message, and also take their own journey into union. So we knew we were going to be of service in that way. And I think the reason that it took the amount of time that it did is we've actually had to walk through the fire a bit to really temper our own steel and yeah, just get a hold on what it looks like once you're in. Because yeah, we took the leap, and we did the inner work that led us to be able to take the leap. But there's a whole other aspect of the embodiment of it while you're in the union. And that is what oath is going to share with others. Is it really, it's going to give you a template and an outline through the path that we walked to get to where we are right now, and what that will look like as a man and as a woman, like the path that I walked, the path that she walked to get us to the cliff. Okay, now we're holding hands and we jump off the cliff together with conviction, faith. Okay, now we're free falling and we crash land. And now this is how you navigate your crash landing, because it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. It's going to have conflict. It's going to have challenge and difficulty. And we've now walked through a fair chunk of that. And I feel like we have a grasp to be able to help others navigate a similar thing. So it really can meet a lot of people. It can meet someone who just knows that they're templated for union and they don't feel like they're close. And they want to know some like tangible steps that they can do on their own to start attracting that frequency and that external being into their life. We can help people who are in a relationship who are questioning like, I love this person. We've been together for 6 years. And like, is this it? Or like, why haven't we gotten married yet? And we'll be able to kind of cut through that and give them our perspective on the potency of commitment and burning the ships and making the oath before God that you're in it till the end, till the last breath in your body, and you're going to give it everything you have. And yes, similarly for people who are in union and having challenges navigating it, while to be completely honest, we are still learning every single day and we will continue doing that for the rest of our lives. I do believe we have a lot of value to add to those people because we have been utilizing, it's been challenging and we have had to utilize tools. And we've had to seek them. We've had to seek support through my men's group, through her women and her circles, and through each other consistently. And so, I think it just has a lot of value for a wide range of people. And we're excited to bring it and birth it into the world and serve as many people as possible with our union.
Yeah. I mean, sacred union really takes a village. It really does. Like we heard that spoken before, at least I know I heard it spoken. I'm not sure if he heard that term, but it was told to me by many people. Like if you really do come into sacred union, if you really want to anchor that kind of template, like you're going to need support, you're going to need community, you're going to need other people around you that you can lean on so that you're not just sourcing everything from each other. And in a lot of ways, we could say that in sacred union, your beloved is your greatest teacher, but you're still going to need other avenues and streams of support. There's no possible way one person can provide all of that for someone else. That becomes codependent. And the truth is like, this is the reality. Like there needs to be other outlets for both parties, and then shared outlets, individual outlets. And we hope that our class can be one of those support tools of really finding a community, finding people that have done it already, that have anchored it, that have been through it, that have learned through the mess and the glory of it, and are willing to share in a very raw way what it takes and some of the challenges that might be faced, and also the fruits of those challenges when you stay convicted through them.
When you say the words like oath and sacrament of union, is that?
Yes.
It just reminds me of ancestral. Those are very ancient terms of a time where marriage was so different and it lasted and there was legacy in that. And I know my generation, most of us came from divorced parents or broken homes, and we're kind of the fruits of that. But it feels like that more traditional way of marriage where you're like in it and working through it and not exiting when times get tough, which will shift the kids that are the children that are born from that, you know, in a big way. Are you guys going to have kids?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's that was one of the main reasons why it's held too. That's like a glued foundation of shared value. I know personally that children are going to be the catalyst for shifting how this place looks. If we had the opportunity to come into a physical body with us as parents to be guides, to nurture and allow those beings to be really fully expressed and to create an environment for them to be able to really thrive without the implantation and all this conditioning and programming and belief systems being thrown at them, rather just letting them explore and do whatever feels natural for them and trusting that they're connected to their signal and that they chose to come into this body through us and that they chose us to be their guides and to give them space to be who they're meant to be. And that mission is one of my primary missions, is not only creating the spaces that allow the children to thrive in that way, but to anchor and bring them in and then also father them. And that will look like mine and also many other children I'm sure I will affect through the different avenues of expression that I take and vice versa. So yeah, it almost all anchors back to the children.
And we share that vision, and that was a huge part of what brought us together. We actually had a very powerful synchronistic experience within a few days of meeting before we even met in the physical, before we even had a phone call, where very magical experience of I had already known the name of one of my sons, and I had been given that a year and a half before ever meeting Ryan, which actually led to the completion of the relationship I was in, which I was praying for guidance, and I was given a vision of my son, and he looked nothing like the man I was with. He had Ryan's eyes, but I saw the blue eyes and I was like, oh, this is not this man's son. And he gave me his name. And a few days after meeting Ryan, we were chatting back and forth over messaging, and there was just all this synchronicity, all this magic happening. And I'll never forget this day. I think it was the moment we both knew, and there was like a no going back at that moment. And again, before we ever even had a phone conversation, this is all still voice notes and text messaging. And he messaged me when I was at the grocery store, sitting outside in my car, and kind of out of nowhere was like, I just had this like lightning bolt realization of what my son's name is. And he said it, and it was the same name I was given for my son. And my whole body just went into this like release process where it almost feels like in that moment the soul of our child was conceived. Like in my body, that's what it felt like I was receiving the soul. And I told him what happened, and he held space for my like emotional release around it, and we had our first phone call that night after that experience.
And after I said that to her, physical lightning came over my house, and there was like an actual storm for like the next 45 minutes. Like lots of lightning strikes and like super windy, and like this like monsoon just came in real quick and then left.
That's powerful.
I was like, okay, there's something going on here.
There's something here.
But I think in that moment, I remember saying to her, I was like, well, we either both have a son named Arthur or our son's name is Arthur.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love Arthur. That just feels like that king energy coming back. Yeah.
Well,
And
Ryan's
really,
actual name means king. Ryan is, that's what that word means in Scottish Gaelic.
beautiful. What's been your guys' biggest lesson in love?
I think I have mine.
You go ahead.
Well, it's funny that we named our offering Sacrament to Union because there was a moment not too long ago, maybe a week or something, and we were in a conflict and it was intense. And I expressed to her that I had sacrificed everything to be here. Like I literally gave up everything. My home, the place I was living, all my friends, all my previous relationships, all my jobs that I was doing, a documentary that I've been working on for 2 years. Like I sacrificed all this. And in the moment that I said it, she got really triggered. And it was like, you sacrificed it? And then I went and I just got the definition of the word and I sent it to her. And a sacrifice is when you give up something for that you believe is of greater value. And so from my perspective, I'm like, yeah, look at everything I gave up for you because I believe you're of greater value than all of those things combined. And I think once that landed in her, she came into the room, into my office and was like, okay, I get it. So yeah, to me, like the greatest lesson in love is sacrifice. It's like, it's not about me. It's not about Ryan. It's not about what Ryan wants. You have to give up your identity of who you think you are over and over and over and over. And that is going to look like sacrifices of what you think you want consistently. And I don't think that that aspect of love will ever go away. You're always going to be sacrificing for God. It's not sacrificing for the other. You're sacrificing for a purpose. You're sacrificing for children. You're sacrificing for God.
Yeah. I think for some reason sacrifice was given like a negative connotation,
Yeah.
but it's not. Like we all sacrifice.
Right.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's actually very similar to what I was going to share as like my deepest lesson. I think probably why this works between Ryan and I is because we both believe in sacrifice and have had hard lessons around it. Both like there's the, challenging path of sacrifice, which can almost come as more of a shadow aspect where we're self-sacrificing at our own detriment, meaning like we're doing that not for a higher purpose, but there's a different sort of agenda or something connected to that where we actually aren't honoring ourselves at all. We're just kind of giving ourselves away. But then the higher, like the true path of sacrifice, I feel like is where we're not clinging to this identity of who we are and what we think we need or desire. And we almost just become vessels for the will of God to move through. And in that self is included because you're not going to ultimately it's just a different energy. It's coming from a different embodiment. It's not coming from this self-sacrificial martyrdom of like, well, I'm not worth anything. It's like actually within that your whole worth is rooted in this knowingness that you are a vessel of God's will, and that in and of itself is high value, high worth. And so, of course, we have to honor ourselves within that, but it looks very different when we're sacrificing from that space and there's this literal offering on the altar of love. And that's what I feel like my highest lesson has been, also very similar to Ryan's, has been there's nothing I would not do for God's will, for God. There's nothing I would not do for love. There's nothing I would not do for the level of devotion I feel to union. And that doesn't mean I don't have moments of forgetfulness or, like it's easy to slide into this place where we're worried about me, mine, what's myself, what's my, my identity, this attachment we have to our personality. And when we can approach love not from that space where we see ourselves not as ourselves, but as also other. Like Ryan is now not separate from me. When I hurt myself, I hurt him. When I hurt him, I hurt myself. And when I hurt either of us, I'm hurting God and betraying my own vows. So, like, when we stop seeing other as just other and we stop separating and like seeing it through the lens of the separate self and all the fear that gets birthed from that space, that's where real union comes from. And within that, sacrifice doesn't feel as hard. It doesn't mean it's easy necessarily, but what I mean is it comes from a different space inside of us. And we feel more like it's a more natural thing, I should just say, to sacrifice on that level from that space, because we know it's not for us and it's not for them. It's for God. It's to be aligned with the will of God. And I think that takes the edge off a little bit, although it's obviously not necessarily a path for like the faint-hearted, so to speak. But I would say that those who walk that path and aren't afraid to give up, aren't afraid to let go, to surrender, they're not afraid to move beyond their own expectations or needs or desires and to surrender to something higher and to sacrifice and to lay things down on the altar, they will be rewarded in love, because there's a kind of love that comes from that cannot be gifted to someone who is viewing everything through the lens of self, through the lens of what I want, what I need, what I want this to look like and feel like, what I want God to give me. And they're ultimately forgetting that, they were made in God's image. So they are, they have this deep connection to the divine and divine will through the pathway of their desires. But that is going to look different when being oriented through the soul versus the personality. Like the me I know myself as is not the me that God sees me as most of the time. So when we start to shift our orientation point in love, a lot becomes available to us. Miracles become available to us in a way that were probably not available when we were still coming from this more selfish standpoint.